I stood outside that door that felt like a fortress to me. When it finally cracked open, I didn't see my son's face first, I saw the raw, red, swollen bruises spreading across his knuckles. This wasn't an accident. This was evidence of a war my son was fighting in secret, and I had no idea it was even happening. If you've ever felt that stranger-like distance in your child's eyes that shakes you to your core, please watch this video till the end. Because the story I'm about to tell you isn't just about my home, it might be the reality hiding behind the doors of many families, in houses that look perfectly normal from the outside. If you enjoy watching parenting, family, and real emotional stories, subscribe to the channel right now, because we bring stories like this often, and I promise you, by the end of this one, you'll be looking at your own children a little differently. Let me take you back to the beginning, because to really understand how far we fell, you need to know how high we once stood. Our home used to be so peaceful. I don't say that lightly, and I don't say it out of nostalgia either. I mean it literally. We were, by most measures, an ordinary, happy family. Laughter at the dinner table. Weekends spent watching cricket with the volume too loud, my husband shouting at the television as if the players could hear him. My son Hamza always kept his bedroom door open at night, as if he wanted me to be able to peek in whenever I wanted, as if he had nothing in the world to hide from me. He used to talk. That's the part one miss most, looking back. He used to walk into the kitchen while I was cooking and tell me, in far too much detail, about a video game level he'd finally beaten, or a joke his friend had made in class, or some argument he'd had with a teacher about a grade he thought was unfair. I used to only half listen, honestly. I'd nod, stir the pot, say, at the right moments, thinking there would always be more time to listen properly later. I didn't know then how much I would give to have those half-listened to conversations back. But over the last 2 or 3 months, everything had changed, so slowly at first that I almost didn't notice it happening, the way you don't notice a room getting darker until you suddenly can't read anymore. The first thing I noticed was that the doors started staying closed. Not slammed shut in anger, just quietly closed, the way you'd close a door if you didn't want anyone walking in on you changing. I told myself that was normal. He was 14, after all. Boys need privacy at that age, I remembered that much from raising my nephews. Then closed turned into locked. I remember the first time I heard that small click of the latch turning, and something in my stomach tightened, though I couldn't have told you why at the time. I told myself it was still normal. Maybe he was worried about his little sister barging in. Maybe he just wanted a space that was entirely his own. And then came a time when I would knock, and all I'd hear from inside was a muffled, "Ammy, I'm fine, please go." Not rude. Not shouted. Just, final. A closed door in the shape of a sentence. I'm a mother. And a mother's heart never believes a lie, no matter how convincingly her child explains it away. But I also didn't want to be the kind of mother who suffocates her son with suspicion over nothing. So I did what so many of us do. I pushed the unease down. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself that this was just what 14 looks like now. I was wrong, and I would spend many sleepless nights afterward wondering how many other signs I had explained away in exactly this manner. Looking back, there were other small things too, things that on their own meant nothing, but together should have told me everything. He stopped eating breakfast with us, claiming he wasn't hungry, when I knew for a fact he used to wake up ravenous. He started wearing long sleeves even in the warmer months, which I noticed but dismissed as some passing fashion phase, the kind of thing teenagers adopt and abandon within weeks. His grades, which had always been steady, began to slip, not dramatically, just a few points here and there, the kind of decline a busy parent can miss if they're not looking closely enough. And his phone, which used to sit face up on the dining table while we ate, started disappearing into his pocket the moment he sat down, screen turned resolutely away from anyone else's eyes. I saw all of it. And I explained all of it away. That evening, when I got home from work a little earlier than usual, there was something different in the air. I can't fully describe it, even now, except to say that a house has a certain feeling to it when everyone inside is at peace, and a completely different feeling when someone inside is hiding something. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet we used to feel. It was a heavy, tense silence, as if even the walls of the house were holding their breath, waiting to see what I would discover. I called out. No answer. My daughter was at a friend's house for a project, my husband wasn't back from work yet, and normally in that stretch of empty house, Hamza's music would be playing softly from his room, or I'd hear the tap-tap-tap of him typing away on some assignment. That evening, there was nothing. Just silence, and somewhere beneath it, that faint sound I couldn't quite place. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand trailing along the banister the way it always did, except this time each step felt heavier than the last, as if some part of me already knew that whatever waited at the top would change something between us. I reached Hamza's door. The door, as always these past weeks, was closed. But this time I could hear faint sounds from inside, like something falling to the floor, or like someone was talking to themselves in short, sharp bursts, almost like counting. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, my knuckles rapping against the wood a little harder this time. Hamza, Beta, open the door. After a few seconds of silence, a faint voice came, breathless in a way that made my chest tighten. 1 minute, Ami. That 1 minute took a full 5 minutes to arrive. 5 minutes in which I stood in that hallway, listening to muffled movement inside, my mind cycling through every possible explanation, each one worse than the last. By the time that door opened, a storm was raging in my mind. Had he fallen in with a bad crowd? Was there some problem at school, some bullying he was too proud to mention? Or, and this thought alone made my hands go cold, was he hurting himself, alone in that room, night after night, while I sat downstairs assuming everything was fine because dinner was on the table and homework was, presumably, getting done? That was the moment where the real turning point of my story begins. Everything before it was ordinary life. Everything after it was a different kind of life altogether, one I hadn't prepared for and didn't know how to navigate. When the door opened, Hamza's face looked normal for a moment, flushed, slightly out of breath, but his expression arranged into something almost casual. He was good at that, I would later realize. Good at arranging his face into a mask of normalcy at exactly the right moment. But there was a strange nervousness in his eyes, a flicker that lasted less than a second but that I caught anyway, because a mother's eyes are trained on her child's face in a way no one else's are. He was avoiding my gaze, looking somewhere just past my shoulder instead of directly at me. And then I saw it. The knuckles on both his hands were red and swollen, angry looking in a way that made my stomach drop before my mind had even finished processing what I was seeing. In places the skin had cracked and blood had dried in thin, dark lines. This wasn't an ordinary injury. I've raised 2 children, I've dealt with skinned knees and stubbed toes and every ordinary bump and bruise childhood throws at a parent, and I knew instantly this was different. This was the kind of injury that happens when a fist strikes something hard, or another person, again and again, with force, over and over until the skin simply gives up. My heart stopped for a moment. Actually stopped, or at least it felt that way, a strange lurching silence in my chest before it started hammering again, too fast, too loud. I immediately tried to take his hand, some instinct in me needing to hold it, to examine it, to somehow undo whatever had caused it just by touching it gently enough. But he quickly pulled his hands back and started tugging his sleeves down over them, an automatic, practiced motion that told me this wasn't the first time he'd had to hide his hands from someone. It's nothing, Ami, we were just playing at school, I fell. But I'm a mother. And a mother recognizes a lie instantly, especially when that lie comes from her own son's mouth, in that particular flat, rehearsed tone that children use when they've said the same sentence to themselves in a mirror, practicing it until it sounded believable. You fell. I repeated, and I could hear my own voice shaking slightly. Hamza, this doesn't look like a fall injury. This looks like an injury from hitting something hard. More than once. His silence scared me even more than his lie had. I looked around the room, and now that I was actually looking, really looking instead of glancing the way I had for weeks. I saw so much I had missed. His bed was a mess, sheets tangled and half hanging off the mattress. In one corner lay an old pillow with its seams torn apart, stuffing spilling out onto the floor, as if it had been punched over and over with real force. There was a faint mark on the wall near his desk, a small dent in the plaster, as if someone's fist, had struck it hard enough to leave a permanent impression. On his desk, half hidden under a textbook, I noticed a roll of what looked like athletic tape, the kind boxers wrap around their hands before a fight, though I didn't fully understand what I was looking at yet. My mind wasn't working properly. Part of me wanted to believe this was just some childish mischief, some strange new trend among his friends, harmless in the way teenage trends usually are. The other part of me, my mother's intuition, the part of me that had carried him and fed him and stayed up all night when he had fevers as a baby, was screaming that something very serious was happening here, something that went far beyond ordinary teenage rebellion. I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper now, "Beta, tell me the truth. Where did these come from? Please. I'm not angry. I just need to know." Tears welled up in his eyes then, sudden and unexpected, and for a moment I thought the wall between us was finally going to come down. But he said nothing. He only said, so quietly I almost missed it, "Amy, please, don't ask right now. Not now. Please." And what could I do? I stood there in that doorway, looking at my son's damaged hands, listening to him beg me not to ask, and I felt, for the first time in his 14 years of life, completely and utterly locked out of his world. In that moment, I realized my son was hiding a secret that might break us both apart, and that the coming days, however they unfolded, were going to test our family in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to my husband, who slept soundly, unaware yet of what I had seen, and I thought about only one question, turning it over and over in my mind like a stone I couldn't put down: how could my son, who was always so gentle, so quiet, the kind of boy who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it, suddenly be injured like this? What had happened to the boy who used to cry when he accidentally stepped on an ant? I thought about calling my sister, who has raised 3 teenagers of her own, but it was past midnight, and some part of me wasn't ready yet to say the words out loud to anyone, as if speaking them would make them permanently, unbearably real. The next day, once Hamza left for school, his bag slung over one shoulder, his sleeves pulled down over his hands even though the morning was warm, I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, untouched tea going cold in front of me, trying to decide what to do. And then I decided I couldn't wait any longer for answers that might never come voluntarily. I decided to look through his laptop and phone. I knew this was an invasion of his privacy, and some part of me felt sick doing it, the way you feel sick doing something you know is necessary but that still feels like a betrayal of trust. But for a mother, when it comes to choosing between her child's life and his privacy, life always comes first. I would rather have an angry son who is safe than a private son whose secrets I never uncovered until it was too late. His laptop was easy enough to access. I knew his old passwords, the ones he'd used for years, and thankfully he hadn't thought to change them. What I found there shook me to my core, in a way that no amount of imagining beforehand could have prepared me for. There was a group chat on his phone, and once I found the corresponding thread on his laptop's messaging app, I began to understand the shape of what I was looking at. It was something that had become known among teenagers in 2026 as underground fight clubs, though calling it a club felt far too organized, too official, for what it actually was. This wasn't organized sport, with referees and rules and padded gloves. These were secret, unsupervised physical fights between teenagers, arranged over encrypted chats, held in abandoned lots and basements, which people would record on their phones and share as content on social media, chasing views and a strange, twisted kind of respect from strangers online. I learned that for the past several weeks, Hamza had been taking part in these fights. Sometimes behind an old, disused factory on the edge of town, the kind of place I would have told him to stay away from if I'd ever imagined he'd go near it. Sometimes in a friend's basement, with the friend's parents completely unaware of what was happening 2 floors beneath them while they watched television upstairs. I scrolled through message after message, my hands trembling, reading exchanges between boys I didn't recognize, usernames instead of real names, arranging times and locations with a casualness that made my skin crawl. You up for tonight? Yeah, 9 p.m., usual spot. Bring your own wraps, mine are trashed. I saw messages where boys bragged about wins, mocked each other for losses, shared short video clips I forced myself not to open, because I already knew what they would show me and I wasn't sure I could bear to see my son in them. But the question that consumed me wasn't just what was happening, it was why. How did my son, who never even raised his voice at anyone, who used to walk away from arguments rather than engage in them, end up caught in a violent circle like this? This wasn't the child I knew. Or perhaps, more painfully, it was a side of him I had simply never had reason to see. When I read further back in the conversation, past the recent fight arrangements, into messages from months earlier, I began to understand. He felt alone at school. Around 6 months ago, his closest friend since primary school, a boy named Bilal, had moved to another city when his father's job transferred, and Hamza had never quite found his footing again after that. His old friend group had drifted away, the way friend groups sometimes do without any single dramatic falling out, just a slow erosion of shared time until there's nothing left holding people together. He had written, in a message to someone I didn't recognize, something that broke my heart to read: "No one really talks to me at school anymore, it's like I'm invisible." And a few weeks after that message, a boy named Danish had messaged him, "Bro, you should come hang with us after school, we do something. It's not like a normal club thing but it's fun, you'll see." And when a few boys included him in this group, inviting him into something that felt exclusive and dangerous and thrilling all at once, it felt to him like, finally, he had found somewhere he belonged. I read a message he'd sent after his first fight, one which he apparently lost badly, judging by the responses of encouragement from the others, that actually felt kind of amazing, not gonna lie, like I finally did something. I sat with that sentence for a long time. My son, who I thought I knew completely, had found a strange, painful sense of purpose in something that terrified me. This wasn't just fighting, it was a place where, for the first time in months, he felt important, felt seen, felt like he mattered to someone. And isn't that, in the end, what all of us are looking for, at any age? To matter to someone. My son had simply found the wrong someones to matter to. In the rush of suburban life, we parents often don't give our children's online lives the attention we should. We think that if a child is home, in his room, doing homework or playing games, he's safe. The four walls of a bedroom feel like enough of a boundary, don't they? We think danger comes from outside the house, strangers in cars, bad neighborhoods, unsupervised time on the streets. We think that as long as our children are physically within our walls, we've done our job. But the truth is that these days, the most dangerous place for many kids isn't a street corner or an alley. It's their own phone, glowing quietly on the nightstand while we sleep peacefully down the hall, utterly unaware of the world our children are stepping into every single night. I asked myself, sitting there with his laptop open in front of me, the cursor blinking on a conversation I never wanted to have found, where did I go wrong? When did I mistake my son's silence for normal teenage moodiness, a phase to be waited out rather than a signal to be understood? When did his closed door become something I respected instead of something I questioned? I had been so proud of myself, in a strange way, for giving him space, for being the kind of modern parent who doesn't hover, who trusts her child. But somewhere along the way, trust without attention had become neglect wearing a more comfortable name. When I told my husband all of this that evening, sitting him down at the kitchen table and showing him what I had found, the atmosphere at home grew even more tense than it already was. His first reaction was anger, sharp and immediate: "We need to stop this right now, or one day he could get seriously hurt. What if something worse happens? What if the police get involved? What if one of these fights goes too far and he ends up in a hospital, or worse?" He wanted to march upstairs immediately, confiscate every device, and forbid Hamza from leaving the house except for school. My thinking was different, though I understood exactly where his fear was coming from. I was afraid that if we confronted him directly, with accusation and punishment as our opening move, he would pull away even further, and bury his secret even deeper, finding new ways to hide it from us that we might never uncover in time. I had seen, in that brief exchange at his bedroom door, how quickly he could shut a conversation down. I worried that heavy-handedness now would simply teach him to lie better, not to stop. This was the first time my husband and I held such different views on something this serious, this frightening. We had disagreed before, of course, about small things, how much screen time was appropriate, whether the children should be allowed to skip a family function for a friend's birthday party, but this was different. This felt like it mattered more than anything we had disagreed about before, and the stakes made every conversation sharper, every disagreement cut deeper. Every night that week we'd argue in low voices in our bedroom, careful not to let the children hear, though I suspect they heard more than we realized. Should we get professional help immediately? Should we inform the school, so they could watch for signs among the other boys involved too? Or should we keep all this to ourselves, handle it quietly within the family, so our perfect family image wouldn't be tarnished in other people's eyes, so relatives wouldn't whisper about us at gatherings, so we wouldn't become the family everyone talked about with that particular mixture of pity and judgment? This question wasn't easy, and I don't think anyone who hasn't faced something similar can fully understand how paralyzing it is. On one side was fear for my son's life and safety, immediate and physical. On the other was fear of society, quieter but somehow just as powerful. What would people say if they found out our son had secretly been going to fight clubs? Would they blame us? Would they say we hadn't raised him properly, hadn't watched him closely enough? Would his prospects, his reputation, his future be affected by whispers that would follow him for years? I am ashamed to admit that this second fear held me back for longer than it should have. Shame is a strange thing. It makes you protect your image even when your child's well-being is at stake, and it took me time to recognize that shame for what it was and push it aside. During this time, my younger daughter, who is only 12, still so young, still someone I thought I was protecting from all of this, also began to feel this tension, no matter how carefully we tried to keep our voices down, no matter how much we tried to shield her from what was happening. Children are far more perceptive than we give them credit for. They feel the temperature of a house change even when no one explains why. At night she'd come out of her room to me, her small face worried in a way that no 12-year-old's face should be, and ask, "Ammi, is Hamza okay? Why are you and Abu fighting so much? Is it because of me? Did I do something wrong?" That last question, that assumption that somehow this tension must be her fault, broke something in me. Her innocent question pierced me to the core in a way that even Hamza's bruised knuckles hadn't quite managed to. In trying to save our son, we were putting our other child's innocence and sense of security under strain too. I realized that whatever we did next, we couldn't keep doing it in whispers and closed doors of our own, hiding worry from a daughter who could sense it anyway and was filling in the blanks with her own fears, likely worse than the reality. That was the moment I realized, Hamza's silence hadn't just shaken him, it had shaken the whole house, rippling outward from his locked bedroom door into every corner of our family life. His secret was no longer just his, it had become a burden all of us carried, whether we wanted to or not, whether we understood it fully or not. And perhaps the most painful part of all of this was that his silence had also forced us, my husband and me, to confront the fears and helplessness we'd been hiding within ourselves for years without ever quite naming them, the fear that we weren't good enough parents, the fear that we had somehow failed at the one job that mattered more than any other, the helplessness of realizing that no amount of love guarantees you'll always know what's happening in your own child's heart. Finally, after days of arguing, of sleepless nights, of watching Hamza retreat further into himself while his knuckles slowly began to heal only to be bruised anew a few days later, we both decided we couldn't wait any longer. Whatever the right approach was, silence certainly wasn't it. One evening, once everyone else in the house was asleep, or at least pretending to be, we both went into Hamza's room and sat down right beside his bed, not as accusers, but as parents who had decided, finally and completely, that his safety mattered more than our fear of his reaction. "Beta," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we haven't come here to punish you. We just want to know that you're okay. We're with you, no matter what you tell us tonight. No matter what you've done. We're on your side. At first he stayed silent, staring down at his hands, at those knuckles that had become the symbol of everything he'd been hiding from us. The silence stretched long enough that I began to fear we'd lost him, that even this gentle approach had come too late. Then tears began streaming from his eyes, quietly at first and then in earnest, his shoulders shaking with a kind of relief that only comes from finally putting down a weight you've been carrying alone for far too long. And he told us everything, the loneliness at school after Bilal moved away, the slow realization that his old friends had simply stopped including him without ever explaining why, trying and failing to make new friends in a school where everyone already seemed to belong to their own established groups, and then the moment Danish and the others had invited him in, offering him a place to belong even if that place was dangerous. He told us about the first fight, how terrified he'd been beforehand and how strange the aftermath had felt, the ache in his hands mixing with something that felt, disturbingly, like pride. He told us about how it had started to feel less like a choice and more like something he couldn't stop, both because he was afraid of losing this fragile sense of belonging and because some part of him had started to need the release of it, the physical proof that he existed and mattered to someone. And then, finally, the realization that he wanted out of it all, that the fear and the exhaustion had started outweighing whatever had drawn him in, but that he hadn't known how to say any of this to anyone, least of all to us, because he was terrified of the very disappointment he now saw, gently, on our faces. That night, our family grew closer than we had been in a long time, closer perhaps than we had ever been, because for the first time in months, there was nothing left hidden between us. We decided to see a family therapist, not just for Hamza, but for all of us, my husband and me included, and even, in age-appropriate ways, for our daughter, so we could understand each other better and rebuild the kind of trust that had quietly eroded without any of us fully realizing it. Over the following weeks, we changed a number of things, not all at once, but steadily, deliberately. We started a no-phone dinner night every week, where everyone would talk without any distractions, phones left in a basket by the door, and at first the conversations were stilted and awkward, but slowly they became easier, then genuine, then something we all looked forward to. We enrolled Hamza in a local boxing gym, with a proper coach and proper supervision, so his energy and drive, and yes, even his need to hit something, to feel strong, to prove himself, could find a safe, supervised outlet instead of a dangerous secret one. We made a point, both of us, of asking him real questions and actually listening to the answers, the way I used to half listen while cooking dinner, except now I put the spoon down and turned around and looked at him while he spoke. It wasn't a fast process. There were setbacks. A few weeks in, we learned he'd been in contact with Danish again, though thankfully he told us himself this time instead of hiding it, and we were able to talk him through it together rather than discovering it in secret. Healing, I learned, rarely happens in a straight line. Slowly, the red bruises on his hands healed, the swelling went down, the skin knit itself back together in a way that no longer told the story of secret fights in abandoned lots. But what healed even more, what mattered infinitely more than his knuckles, was the bond between us, the trust that had been damaged and was now, piece by piece, being rebuilt. If you're also going through a time where your child has gone quiet, started closing doors, or is hiding something behind sleeves pulled down too far or excuses that don't quite add up, please, listen before you get angry. Look before you assume. Sometimes a child's anger or silence is actually a cry for help, a desperate, clumsy attempt to be understood in a world that so often feels like it stopped paying attention to them. Before the door breaks, learn to open it. Before the silence becomes permanent, learn to sit beside it, patiently, without judgment, until it finally speaks. This story isn't just about our home. It's the story of millions of homes where children are quietly going through a battle we can't see, and parents have no idea it's even happening, sitting downstairs assuming everything is fine because dinner is on the table and the door upstairs is, for now, still closed but not yet locked. If this video touched your heart, please like it, so more people can find this story and maybe recognize something in their own homes before it goes any further. If you have a story like this too, or you'd like us to make a video on another topic close to your heart, please tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories, and I promise you, whatever you're going through, you're not as alone in it as it might feel right now. And if you enjoy watching real, emotional family stories like this one, subscribe to the channel right now and hit the bell icon, so you never miss a new video. See you in the next story. Until then, take care of yourself and your loved ones, and maybe, tonight, knock on a door you've been walking past too quickly.